I'm Yo-Yo.
And I'm Katia. Welcome to our podcast.
Each week we learn from the experts about all things women's health and happiness.
We are two very normal, imperfect women.
Navigating this crazy thing called life.
And trying to stay happy and healthy while we do it. So, grab a cuppa.
Or tidy away that pile of laundry.
And enjoy our discoveries. Hello.
Hello everyone. Welcome to episode
46.
And today we have a wonderful woman called Vanessa White, who is an accredited breakup, divorce and relationship coach and master practitioner.
Vanessa originally trained as a dietitian, but then moved on to work in education and as a crisis counsellor, which she still currently does on a voluntary basis.
She has 4 children, a dog, leads a full life, but most importantly, she is happy, despite having spent years and years in a coercively controlling and highly toxic relationship.
She now coaches others through the emotional and practical side of a breakup and divorce. Having lived through it herself, she can truly, compassionately help others going through the emotional rollercoaster of any toxic relationship journey.
And she helps them to rebuild their self-worth and self-esteem and to start again in the journey of finding a wonderful life partner. So today's conversation...
Yes, is all about relationships.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful.
Relationships, the good, the bad, the ugly.
The good, the bad, the ugly. It's not all negative.
No.
Just want to put it out there. There is plenty of realistic stuff about toxic relationships, but we definitely finish off with a positive note.
Yeah, we talk about dating. We talk about how to make your relationship. We talk about Love Island.
Yeah,
we talk. It's a nice. Yeah. As always, it's a relaxed conversation about a very serious topic at the start, but then also just talking about relationships in general. So it's kind of a bit for everybody.
Yes.
But we hope even if you're not living through this yourself, that if you ever know somebody who goes through a relationship breakup, you can be there for them as well. She gives some great tips and advice on that too.
Absolutely. So either for yourself or for a friend, or for a family member.
Yeah. So it's really
and Katia had this great idea, and it's a great idea. So Vanessa's website has this wonderful quotation on it, and we thought we would start off this episode by reading it out. So there you go, Katia.
Okay, thanks.
I'll set you up there.
It's not what happens to us in life that defines us. It's what we do about it that makes us the person we are today. Now is the time to gain clarity about your situation, take your power back, and create the future you deserve.
So, without further ado, we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Vanessa. It's so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, wonderful. So, yes, we always like to dive straight in to the meaty content. So you are a relationship and divorce coach.
I am, yes.
Yeah. So where do we even start? I think in your bio, you talk a little bit about having had a toxic relationship and helping people through those. How does one even recognize that one has a toxic relationship?
That's a really good question. And yes, I have been in an abusive relationship. I was in an abusive relationship for 20 years, so a long time. And I didn't even realise I was in one until very, very near the end. And that's one of the difficulties, to be honest, because it's kind of a drip, insipid kind of increase of certain behaviours towards you, and you don't realise that it's happening. And certainly I would never have put a label on it as to abuse. So it is really, really challenging. And, firstly to say that anyone who feels they might be in a toxic or abusive relationship listening to this right now, or has been in one, it is not your fault. It is never, never, never your fault as to how somebody else chooses to behave towards you. So I just want to say that sort of right on the off. There are lots of different kind of signs as to what might be construed as a toxic relationship. Is your partner quite jealous and possessive? Are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells a lot? I mean, I certainly lived literally walking on eggshells all the time, that sort of feeling in my
Oh,
stomach. That's a big kind of clue that something is not right. It doesn't feel right. Is your partner very charming, very lovely, and then changes? So like a Jekyll and Hyde character where they're suddenly nasty to you, abusive to you, calling you names. If there's that kind of switch between the two where you don't quite know what you're going to get, that's another sign. That there is toxicity there. Does your partner tell you who you can see, where you can go, what you can do? That's not part of a healthy relationship, that kind of behavior. So that's another kind of clue as to, toxicity being there. Does your partner control the money in the relationship? Some people sort of say, oh, yes, we have a joint bank account and my partner does all the bills and all the money and tells me what I can spend and when I can spend it. And, some people think it's a lovely thing, they're being looked after, whereas actually it's what we would call financial and economic abuse and is very toxic. So if you don't really
although
have,
I do want to interject maybe a little bit. I see what I 100% see what you are saying, but personally, I'm just very lazy. So I I really appreciate that my husband pays the bills and does all these things from our joint bank account. But then I guess he doesn't. So I don't. I see that as brilliant. But I guess I can also spend whatever I want to spend. I have no qualms about that. So I'm just putting that in there. Some people might be like, "Oh, my partner does do that," but I don't see that as a problem.
it's not your partner paying the bills. It's more, I have people who their income goes straight into an account that they don't really see and they can't have access to directly. I have clients who
Oh,
have no bank cards, but it's deemed and it's
oh,
sort of portrayed to them that this is being looked after. I'll look after all the money. You don't need to worry about it. Just come to me if you need any money. That kind of scenario is
oh,
not
yeah, yeah,
just kind of our partner, like you said, which is a lovely thing, is sort of sorting out the bills and paying them. So there's a kind of a subtle difference. And I would also say that usually with these kind of traits and signs, there will be more than one present. So it won't just be one kind of small thing. When we see toxicity in a relationship, it's a kind of culmination of many different types. So, you may have heard of coercive control, where someone is really controlled within the relationship and, made to feel that they can't kind of do anything. You usually will see other types of abuse too, which might be financial abuse, might be physical abuse, could be tech abuse now. There's a lot of kind of domestic abuse that's also gone on to, people's phones and things like that. And usually we see a few different types rather than just one isolated type.
yeah. It's like a checklist. Like if you tick off 3 out of this list, or yes, yeah,
Also, as you said, these are all some of them seem quite extreme, like, the money goes straight into account and don't see it. But then it's also like kind of that, like, I suppose it's the death by a thousand cuts thing, that they're so small, some of these things.
yeah. It's
You're so,
difficult for
so
one
right,
person to
Katja.
recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it's so, I
Interesting.
mean, it is, and I can't overemphasize what you just said, because certainly in my experience it was, they were so small that you didn't notice it, and it was over a long time. And yeah, you kind of, because you know, I look at myself and I was very vulnerable, I suppose, at the time. I didn't have a lot of self belief. I didn't have a lot of self worth. I'm not like the woman who's sitting here now talking to you. I looked the same.
Oh,
I
okay.
kind of had the same personality, but oh my gosh, inside, I really, I was so low on my self belief and self worth that I didn't immediately, I'm quite a people pleaser. So I kind of thought, oh, well, it's because I'm doing this, or actually, is that really odd, or is it normal? Or, you don't you don't realize, you do not realize. And you hear a lot of this, that people sort of say just leave, or just say don't do that, or don't treat me like that. And it is so not that simple. I mean, you're frightened, you're terrified. I mean, you know I it was not particularly physical abuse with me. And that's the other thing to emphasize. Just because you are not being punched or kicked or your hair pulled or pushed, it is not then that is the only form of domestic abuse. And that's another thing to be really clear about. There are so many other forms, and mine was, some of the behavior was extreme and horrific, but I wasn't punched, and the scars stay
Mm.
with you. And so some people would, because they're not being physically abused, might not perceive that some of these behaviours are actually abuse and are, coercive control is a criminal offence now.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very complex situation, and sort of you've got a whole kind of lot of stuff going on all at the same time, and you feel, you're worn down, you are, gradually chipped away at. And I gradually kind of shrunk into myself, because I kept thinking, well, if I don't do this, then that behavior won't happen. So you shape shift and sort of change yourself a little bit each time, because you think, well, I did that, so if I don't do that, then he won't do that. But of course, that's not how it
Yeah.
works, because there's always something. And so gradually you shrink yourself and become so diminished and so small, and you don't really speak. And that's the kind of person. So you just become this sort of shell of yourself, really.
Oh, that's so sad to hear. How
That's really hard.
yeah, that's hard.
Especially as you said, as sometimes you said you had some big things happen, but those small things, as you said, you don't raise it or say don't do that or something like that, because they're so small. If you also raise it, it's like, well, why are you making a mountain of a molehill kind of thing? And it's you don't, and also because you don't see the inside of other people's relationships, you don't you question if it is normal, and you just have got it wrong, I
Yeah.
suppose.
You're
Yeah.
so right, Kat. I mean, it's because it's behind closed doors. Obviously the nature of it is it's in our homes, it's in our relationships. So we never know what's going on behind closed doors. Outside in the world, people would not have known. I mean, I told no one, literally, till the very, very end. No one. I was so good at masking what was going on. I mean, I was an expert at doing that. So no one would have known what was going on. And these people are very clever. They're quite manipulative by nature, and so they're very clever. And when there are people around, they're not showing necessarily that behaviour. And you're right in terms of what you're saying. You sort of start doubting yourself and questioning, or they say, "Well, don't be silly. That's normal," or "You're just being silly now," or and that's actually what's called gaslighting. So you may have heard the term gaslighting. And that is really where
Yes.
someone is made to believe certain things either didn't happen or they did happen. There's a question about the reality of what's going on. And that is a really cruel behavior where, you really start questioning who you are, and you think, well, I know we had that discussion, but I mean, they're adamant that you didn't. And then you start thinking, well, maybe they're right and we didn't have it. And this is a cumulative effect with everything else. And this happens a lot, that you do just, you question then everything. You question who you are, which sounds ridiculous, really. But that's kind of the reality of it, unfortunately.
Mm. Wow. Gosh. So yeah, we've described a lot about now what a toxic or a controlling relationship looks like. How does one get out of that? What are
Where
the
do they
steps
start?
where they start? What are the steps you took kind of personally to recognize and to get in a better position?
For me, I mean, somebody actually, a medical professional actually told me, because they had witnessed some really terrible behaviour towards me, and they then actually told me, aside, what was actually going on for me, and did I realise? And I was like, no, they put the kind of label on it, domestic abuse. So that was how I knew by then things were. This was more just than me just being very unhappy. Um, And when someone puts that label on it, I've got 4 of my own children, so I'm protecting my children. Um, when someone puts that label on and they know what they're talking about, it wasn't just like a friend or family member. Um, I really sat up and took note. Then I start researching it and I see all these things. I can tick, that tick list where it's like, is this happening? Is that happening? Do you feel this? And I was like, oh my God, I can tick all of those lists. And then I was like, gosh, I then also thought about my children, because I was there thinking I was protecting them and doing the right thing. But of course, then I'm like, okay, we need to kind of change things up here, and I need to kind of change the process of getting out. On average, someone who's in an abusive relationship can try and leave about 8 times before they actually leave. So that gives you some idea when you hear and people say just leave, it is not that
There's no
simple.
just about it. Yeah.
Because, firstly, there's safety. So if you have a safety consideration, because statistically, you're at most risk of harm when you leave an abusive relationship or just after. So when you hear about these kind of terrible, terrible stories in the news where someone left a relationship finally and then they were murdered, there are a lot of examples, sadly, about that, because the person has finally lost ultimate control because you've gone. That is real, the risk then. So there is a real safety issue about leaving a relationship like that. So you kind of have to get your ducks in a row. And I found out information. I spoke to professionals without my ex-partner knowing, so that I had all the information. I kind of was clear, and my situation was. It took quite a lot of months for me to then be like, I gave myself a year. I thought, right, by this point next year, I've got to be out of this with the children. And of course, you're frightened if you've got children. There's a lot of manipulation. As soon as the partner maybe gets wind that you're going or you are going, then obviously the thing starts, well, you won't have the children. I will get the children. You won't get to keep the children, which of course, that would have been my ultimate nightmare. And so there's a lot of that which keeps people in
Yeah.
a relationship because they're terrified of that. Money is a massive issue. People who don't have money, particularly what we talked about earlier about if you've had your money kind of ring fenced away, you have no funds. Even if you've got a job, some people who their salary, like I said, goes straight into another bank account and they don't see it. How can you leave? Where can you go? And that's where kind of getting some support from family and friends is really vital. But there's all those considerations. So it is really quite complex to go, and it can be frightening. And you're so controlled. I can't overemphasize that feeling that, it's hard to kind of put it into words because, but you can't sort of think you can't think for yourself in a funny sort of way. So it's really hard to leave, but it is possible to leave. And that is a really important message. And people like me, your local domestic abuse charity is worth contacting. Talk to somebody, talk to the police if you need to, talk to someone you know and you really trust. And you can leave. And, I would want to help anyone to try and leave a situation like that.
Okay.
So the
Wow.
first step would be to reach out to people, reach out to someone outside your circle.
I think so. I would say, I would say reach out to somebody. So if there's somebody, I eventually told a really good friend of mine what kind of just the situation, and that was a massive, the relief of actually then telling someone was amazing. But that was really helpful. So you have some support, you trust them, because obviously you don't want anyone to say anything to your partner. And they can help you kind of, get things together if necessary. I would say particularly if you're married and you have children, try and speak to a family solicitor, so a family lawyer.
Yeah.
Who is expert in this area in terms of actually the legalities of breaking up. So I would say,
Yes.
most of them have a free consultation or a set price for a consultation initially. But that will give you the opportunity to talk to them about your concerns and also to hear where you actually stand. So if in your ear your partner has been saying to you, because this could have been, they could have been saying to you all along, never leave me because you won't get the children, that kind of thing, which keeps you there, you can actually speak to somebody who can say, well, that can't happen. They can't just take your children. This would, this is the process. And that can be really quite reassuring. So I would say get clarity on where you stand in the situation from someone who
Yeah.
knows, and obviously you get confidentiality with that. And doing all that before can really, really help give you some confidence to think, actually, I can do that, and take those first steps, really.
Okay,
Okay,
amazing.
wonderful. Now, I just kind of want to bring it maybe around to a slightly more positive point. So, after some very unfortunate soul who's been in this situation has kind of done the steps and had support legally to leave and things, how do they then start again? That must be a difficult position. So, what do they look for in a new partner? If they try to avoid the same situation, like let's talk about the actual dating experience after, perhaps,
I
if you're
love,
happy.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
there
yeah, no,
anything
yeah,
else you
yeah.
wanted to ask? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love, I mean, I'm really, obviously I do a lot of work, like you said, in the kind of that negative arena. But I am massive, massive advocate for, I love, healthy relationships and love. And I think there is nothing more wonderful. And I think I'm a massive advocate for helping people to understand what a healthy relationship is, because what you can find, rightly as you say, Jojo, is that cycle where you keep going back and getting involved with another toxic person, and that's because we need to do some work on ourselves. Again, it's not because it's your fault, but obviously we're going for what's familiar to us, which is what we tend to do in dating, and we need to break that behavior pattern so that we start actually attracting and going for people who are different from that. And that takes some work. But I mean, dating is a whole topic. I mean, I love talking about dating, and I love, you know, kind of helping people with dating, because I think it's really positive. It can be terrifying for people. And if you've been in a toxic relationship where you're just so you don't want to get involved with someone like that again, it can be even more terrifying. And I would definitely say, whatever your situation, first and foremost, understand your needs in a relationship. So actually do some work on, and not as in, I want tall, dark, handsome, or I want blonde and, long legs. There are sort of wants and desires, which is fine. It's not it, you can have those too, obviously, but our core needs. So, you know, that is really important. The kind of non-negotiables for you, that you would not get involved with somebody if they had one of these things. And I would say you kind of only really want 3 or 4 core needs, because they're the real things that are absolutely no way you get out, and you don't turn around and kind of get involved with this person. So I think looking at that, because what we don't want in relationships is to abandon those needs. So to stay with somebody, we abandon our own core needs, and that's where these issues can arise. So understanding what those are first and foremost, I think, is really important. Knowing your values in relationship, do you want to get married? Do you want children? What's important to you in terms of values. I think obviously healing from raw emotion. A lot of people kind of jump out of a relationship then straight into dating, and they're really still raw, they're heartbroken, but they're trying to kind of help themselves feel better by going and, dating someone else. And you know, if we're feeling very, very raw and very, very emotional, our judgment is not very good. Well, certainly mine isn't. You're feeling really upset, sad all the time. And my judgment goes out the window. And obviously that's not the best time to be trying to find someone new, because what you might, perceive as someone who's amazing and the right thing for you might be totally not, but you're so clouded with all this negativity. So I think, try and get rid of some of that raw emotion. I think listening to our gut. is a really important thing in dating, because, you know, our gut is there to protect us, our gut instinct. And certainly we tend to kind of squash down those feelings a lot and, you know, ignore them. And our gut is the first warning sign that, hang on a minute, something doesn't feel right, or actually you don't like the way that person is behaving. So really listen to that. And it's telling you something. Doesn't mean you have to get out straight away or not go on a second date with them, but just be really aware of what is going on. Because I suppose that's warning you about red flags potentially, which are the warning signs. And again, they're just something to be aware of. Red flags are not, you know, if you have a lot of them with someone, I would be really, really cautious about going forward. But if there's one, you know, just see what else is going on, but listen to that gut instinct, I would say.
Okay. And are red flags different for everyone, or is there like a standard red flags that someone should look out for?
Yeah, red flags. No, red flags. I mean, your red flags and my red flags might be different,
Okay.
but in terms of specifically, but really what a red flag is they are warning signs, and they can be an indicator of toxicity, unhealthy behavior, abusive behavior. So they are something to pay attention to. And like I said just now, if there's one red flag coming up, um, you know, you might just be aware of it and think, okay, I'll just see what else is going on, but I'm not going to kind of get out right now and not maybe see them again. But if there is someone who has got a lot of red flags, then I would be very, very cautious. And, you know, an example might be, where I would think is a red flag is if you're out with someone, say in a bar having a drink, and you're on your first date, and they're really rude and really, really awful in the way they speak to the barman, say, and then the waitress comes along to take your order, and their behaviour is like really awful to these, you know, people who are helping. That is a red flag for me. So that would be what I would
Yes,
say as an
yes.
example of red flag. Now, on its own, that maybe they're just having a bad evening, they're a bit grumpy, they, you know, there could be other reasons why they're behaving like that. But I would call that a red flag, and I'd be like, okay, actually, is there other behaviours that I don't like, um, that I'm seeing, or is it just that? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
It's other things like that go on, like, you know, you shouldn't have to like force people to spend time with you. Like, you know, they can't go hot and cold. It has to be, you know, that is a huge one. Like, you know, if someone wants to spend time with you, they will make time to spend time with you.
I guess in the dating
In a dating
scenario, isn't it?
scenario,
Like
yeah.
if someone then blanks you for a while,
And then comes back,
and
it's
then
like,
comes back all lovey, that might be a bit of a red
I'd just be
flag,
like, no.
kind of.
I would
Yeah.
always say to whoever you are, whatever age you are, man or woman, you deserve the best. You know, you deserve somebody, whether you're just dating them for a few dates and having fun, or you want a long-term relationship and you hope to get married to somebody. It doesn't matter, but you deserve somebody who treats you with respect, who knows your worth, who is kind. You know, they're kind of they should be base level things.
They're
And
basic human.
100%,
They're basic human.
Yes.
absolutely, 100%. And so, you know, that what you've just described, someone who kind of is nice to you, then they kind of go off for a bit, then they come back. You know, that sort of behaviour, I would say to anyone is no, because somebody, you know, people often say, oh yeah, but I was so busy, I'm so busy at work, and I've got kids, and I can't, and you think, no, however busy you are, you can always find some time for something that's important to you. So even, you know, there is no way that if you know, think about it yourself, if you really want to see someone, however busy you are, however much you're juggling, you will make some time for them. But that is an indicator they're not really that interested. I would say my thing, if somebody, you know, I have clients who come to me and they say that sort of thing, oh yeah, but I really like this person, and you know, I see them and then they disappear and they say they're really busy at work, and I'm like, you deserve better. You deserve someone who is sure about you. They just are sure. you're not questioning in your head, when are they going to contact me? You know, you're not constantly looking at your phone thinking, are they going to text me? And they haven't mentioned anything about doing anything for like 3 weeks. No, we shouldn't be questioning those things. And I think we deserve the best. Absolutely, everybody does. Best treatment from anyone.
Yeah.
We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We'd love to help more women out there, so please subscribe, rate and review, which helps more people find us. And share this episode with any friends who you think will enjoy it too. Thank you. And without further ado, here's the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that just reminds me of just what people do when they're teenagers, isn't it? It's not what adults do.
It's not.
Supposed to do anyway.
But I think there's so many problems because communication is one of the biggest issues in relationships. You know, I like to think that a relationship is one long conversation. So if we're thinking about it in those terms, communication can really make or break relationships. They can make or break how we feel. You know, if we're too scared to communicate our needs to our partner or to a date or to tell them how we feel about things, then that's a red flag, because we shouldn't feel like that. But people kind of don't communicate because they think, oh, if I say this, they might not want to see me again. Or if I tell them I don't like the way they're behaving like that, they might say, well, I'm leaving you. You know, so people get scared of that. And if we're in that situation where we're feeling scared of saying things like that, I would say be really aware and really look at your relationship or look at who you're dating.
I'd say that I am also like, communication is probably, our hands on heart, is mine and Neil's worst thing.
Really?
Like, we struggle. He works away for 5-6 weeks at a time, and he's worked away for 3 months at a time. So communication is not as in like he comes home at 5 o'clock and then we just don't speak for the evening. It's a bit harder. But I definitely think even then that the whole making the effort to communicate and to say exactly what you think, because we only get like 5 minutes, maybe a week, where it's actually just us two talking.
You're like kind of passing ships in the night,
yeah,
aren't you?
and I think with young children and everything just goes in. I do understand that communication is hard for everybody, especially, you know, that's probably our main thing that we need to work on better, and talking more and talking about the things you said and not being scared to say them, because we might only have 5 minutes to talk and you don't want to ruin a nice night or a nice phone call.
Yeah,
but some things need to be said of like,
yeah. Interesting. What I was also gonna mention. So it could be that it's a problem of the partner if someone's scared to talk to them, but it could also be an internalized thing of the person who is scared. Maybe they're unnecessarily scared. You know, sometimes it's like difficult who. If
based
they
on previous,
maybe they're projecting. They're like, oh, I can't say this, but actually maybe they could. I don't know. I think
you're so right. I think that's really interesting, because I think you are right. I think there could be that in the mix. I think, you know, and that's where actually doing some work on ourselves, you know, to actually, you know, any relationship or even any date, even if you go on one date with someone, we learn something from it. We should learn something about ourselves from it. You know, less focus on the other person, but actually we should be reflecting on, how did we show up in that encounter or in the long-term relationship if it's that? And actually doing some of that work and thinking, okay, I recognize that, you know, I still struggle to be able to open up and be vulnerable, because what you're really talking about is then the fear in me of actually saying it. The other person might be perfectly lovely, really healthy, not toxic at all, but I'm frightened, you're right, of saying it. That's because I'm scared of being vulnerable, really. And that takes practice. So, you know, that's it's not because the other person in front of us is unhealthy or toxic. And so if we're feeling that I still am scared to say how I feel because it's making me really vulnerable and I'm scared of that, that's where the work is really in that situation. Because, you know, there is someone stood there or in a relationship with you who is lovely and amazing and very understanding, very compassionate towards you. And yet I still can't be vulnerable. And so it's then looking about, why can't I be vulnerable? Where is that coming from? And try it. Start really small and actually say to your partner, actually, I'm really struggling. I really want to open up to you. I want to say some things to you. but actually I feel really scared, I feel really vulnerable. It's okay to tell them that before you even tell them what you want to say to them. And if they're really a compassionate, loving, understanding partner, they will help reassure you and help you through that as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
really,
does.
and really good advice for, I think, a
For
lot of
anybody,
people.
yeah,
A
in a
lot of
relationship
people.
or just dating, or and it is hard, I suppose, when you've had previous experience with toxicity, and people, when you do say something vulnerable, being like you're being gaslighting you, the fear, and I suppose it's fear to have it happen again is where you need to be strong in yourself, isn't it? It's where you said the work needs to come in, because you need to know that you feel this way and it's okay to feel the way you feel and to say it out loud, and someone acknowledge that it's okay is a big thing. It's not that acknowledgement has to come from the person. If they don't acknowledge it, then it's not you. You're still allowed to feel what you feel or say your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, totally. I think, because in a relationship, we cannot control the other person, however loving and good they are as a person. We have no control. Once we say something or we do something, how they receive it is up to them, and we can't then control it. And it's the same in reverse, obviously. So, actually, if we're saying to somebody, I feel really vulnerable, I'm actually, I find it really hard to open up. Um, how they react is the key. If they react in a kind, compassionate, reassuring, loving way, that's great. If they react in a way that is like, well, you're terrible, why can't, in a way that is kind of obviously not great, that tells you everything you need to know. And obviously that I would be then questioning that the relationship and the other person if they react like that. But it absolutely is. It's very understanding to be vulnerable. And the more, you know, in your past, this is where your past comes into play. Because the more hurt you've had, the more behaviour towards you where perhaps when you've opened up in the past, someone has totally trashed everything you've said or made you feel about this small. You're obviously going to be more scared to open up, even when you have someone really kind there. So it's all also about the history that we bring with us. And that's where, when a relationship ends or you finish dating someone, reflecting and actually learning from that, getting some help from a professional like me, or, can actually really help you so that you're prepared for the next time you date someone. You're in a better place. You show up as a better version of yourself, and you are feeling like, actually, I could open up a little bit. And if someone is horrible to me when I am vulnerable, then they're not the person for me. But it takes work, and relationships, it's constant work, and it's really hard. They're
Yeah.
hard things.
Well, what if someone, a friend or a family member comes to you, you're the friend that they come to, like how would you support someone, or even if it's in a relationship advice or anything, how would you support a friend or family member, and they are vulnerable to you and tell you how they're feeling about their relationship?
I think it's a lovely thing if somebody does open up, and obviously someone has chosen you to open up to, and that's a really important thing to remember. They haven't randomly chosen you unless it suddenly spurs out, in an emotional kind of situation. But if they thought, I want to talk to you about it, they've chosen you for a reason, and that's a really lovely thing. I would say, first of all, be there for them. So, it's not trying to solve the situation for them, which, a lot of us go into that. I want to solve it. I want to make it better. We can't solve it for them, but it's actually being there for them. And so they know that they can talk to you at any point. Because often it might just be they want somebody they trust to just listen to them. They have nowhere else to offload. But yeah, try not to denigrate the partner, particularly, it's very easy as well. We go, oh yes, they're awful. Oh yes, well I've never liked them, and yes, they're terrible. You hear yourself doing that because you think you're supporting your friend or your family member, but of course, what happens is if they then get back together with that person and you've laid out everything you think about their partner, that's not great then afterwards. So I would say just be very careful at doing that. It's not about dissing the other person because you think that's going to help them feel better, in that can have its own issues going forward. So focusing on them, the person who's talking to you, not their partner. And, try and kind of be understanding and non-judgmental. So whatever the situation, um, you know, say you had a friend who has had an affair themselves, this kind of thing could happen. So it's not just, oh, my partner had an affair and I want to talk to you about it. I've had an affair, and they come to you and say, I don't know what to do. Obviously, you might then immediately go, gosh, had an affair? That's terrible in your mind. But obviously, we don't want to say that to the friend who's come to you and said, I don't know what to do. I've had an affair and I don't know whether to tell my partner or not. Again, we have to hold our non-judgmental thing, whatever they tell you, which might be something that surprises you like that. It's don't make them feel any worse than they already do. Be kind and compassionate. Relationships are complex. The reason why people have affairs is incredibly complex. And, that's an example where you might be quite judgmental because of our own beliefs, our own values, but that friend is chosen to tell you. So we try and be supportive and understanding in situations and help them get practical advice if they need it. So if you think it would help them to speak to a solicitor or help them to get professional advice from someone like me, help them find someone to talk to like that. I think all those ways can be really, really valuable, but mainly be there, be kind, and, just let them know you're hearing what they're saying, really.
Oh,
Yeah.
You'd never, that's such a, that, especially the bit where you said like they've come to you for a reason, like you've had the honor of someone trusting you is
Yeah,
something that is like,
A big
a
deal.
big deal.
Yes.
100%. It's really special. Yeah, if you've been chosen, you have to think of it like that. That they have chosen you for a reason to talk to, and that's a massive compliment. I would see that, and I think actually that's a really special thing because it shows how much they value you as a person, and actually that's lovely for you too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So there's another question. Without, I guess we've covered toxic signs of toxic relationships a lot, but as a kind of bird's eye view, what do you think are the main causes of relationship failures? Um,
in
so
general.
in general, so like a toxic partner might be one of these, but yeah, your own kind of summary of what you think are the main things and how people might avoid them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I would say that growing apart is a big cause of relationship breakdown, um, and sort of a lack of emotional intimacy. So, what you can sometimes see is that, you've got two partners, and, ideally through a relationship, you both do your growth. And not in the same way or the same things. One might be through their work and they get, amazing promotions and things like that. And, one might be through what they do as a family member or with something else in their life. But you kind of both grow and develop in the relationship. And what happens very often is that one is doing that growth and developing and the other one isn't in their life. And I see that quite a lot, and when you get that sort of situation, you end up with this void here, space between the two of you. And the bigger that gets, this is you growing apart essentially. And, I think there's a phrase that is like, couples either, grow together or they grow apart. There's no static in a relationship. And I think that's a really, really true saying, actually. So if you end up like this, you just grow apart. And unless, again, if you don't talk about it, but even when you do talk about it and you recognize this is happening, which I see a lot of people who do, they know this is happening, but they can't stop it because this person doesn't want to change, doesn't want to do any growth. They're happy with where they are. That's fine, but you're not. And you very often see then those couples break up. You see that sometimes at, empty nester time when children have gone. So one of the couple has been very focused on the children, then the children all go, and you suddenly realize you're like this from your partner and you hadn't even realized it. And that's when a lot of people break up at that point because that void is just too big. And, obviously that's quite sad as a situation because it's not anyone's done anything horrible or wrong, but you just aren't compatible anymore. that's a big cause of breakup. Infidelity is definitely a big one. Financial issues can have a massive strain on a relationship and can cause relationship breakdown, either because you suddenly have no money, someone loses their job and your financial position really changes, and that's really hard to adjust to as a couple, or you have very different habits in terms that become very clear. So finances can cause breakdown. Poor communication is a massive one on many different levels. And then lack of sex, lack of physical intimacy is a big reason why couples end relationships, because it's very important. And again, there's no normal with sex and intimacy. People say, well, how much sex should we be having? What's normal? It's what's normal for you. And again, if you find one of you is kind of here with their sex, they don't mind having it once a year on their birthday, but you want it every week, that mismatch is huge, and that can cause you to break up, because that's a very different sexual level of desire that you two have, and that can be very difficult. But if you both are happy with sex once a year on your birthday, that's great. But if you're not, it causes problems.
I'm getting a bit depressed about that conversation.
Birthday suit.
Birthdays only? Are you joking?
Well, you're lucky in a couple.
But it's an important thing to mention.
You have two birthdays, so it's okay.
Yeah,
one each. So
I might be like the king or the queen, have two. Declare.
But it's we laugh, but it's
a big thing. It's a big thing. It is a big thing, and I understand
to mention.
It is really important.
And also, as you said, is that everything is about the void and communicating to not have that void, and understanding yourself within that and the other person. So you've grown, but also what do you get out of the sex, needing sex every week versus the other person? Do they get something that they don't have? Is it? I read something somewhere where it's like it's not necessarily about you might have, like, I might say, just an example, I might say sex to me is like, because that's the way I feel love, but the other person feels it in other ways.
It's very emotional.
So it's a kind of like, it's a different thing. And I'm not saying that is true for me, but I'm saying in general that it's that communication of what it is.
Yeah.
It's back to that same thing. Because if you imagine you're in a situation where your sex drive, your sexual appetite, your need for sex is very different, or physical intimacy, and then on top of that, you can't communicate about it, because we find talking about sex so difficult in the world, in society, really, more so than finances, actually. And people, can find finance is really difficult to talk about, but people talking about sex. So if you have a mismatched sexual kind of appetite in the relationship, and then you can't communicate with your partner about that, obviously you've got, everything is then ramped up. And then what happens, because often what I see is people who stop having sexual intercourse, or really physical intimacy at a deeper level. And if someone then is like, I don't want to have sex, they pull back from everything that's physical. So it pulls back from kissing, it pulls back then from holding a hand, it pulls back then from even touching each other on the sofa accidentally. They then sit the opposite end of the sofa, because that fear of, well, if I touch them, they might think I'm going to have sex and I don't want sex. You get into all that kind of stuff, which happens relatively easy without people you realizing it. They're suddenly in that position because they can't talk about the fact they want different things in sex. So it has such a huge knock-on effect. And it's back to that thing. If we could talk to our partner, it might not mean you suddenly have a totally matched physical intimacy kind of appetite, but it would help you understand the other one and potentially get help if you need it, and all those kinds of things. So it's back to that thing, talking about these things doesn't necessarily always solve them. It doesn't necessarily mean relationships won't end, but it definitely helps.
Yeah. You kind of talked about how, like, we, as a society, don't talk about certain things. Is there anything else that you wish that we were better at doing as a a society or some myths you see that your way relationships are portrayed in the media? Is there anything that you want to like that you see as a professional thing? Be like, that's not
Do you
that's
want to
not right.
rant? Do you want to rant
Do you
about
to
anything?
There are. I mean,
Excuse
this
me.
is a whole nother. This is a whole nother, another podcast. Because I do. Because I mean, just generally, yeah. I think there's a lot of, relationships are really complex. They have many, many layers to them, and I think there's a big tendency to simplify everything in relationships when we talk about it, or when you see it in dramas or in the media or even on social media. Everything's very simplified, and that's just not how relationships are. I think there tends to be quite a lot of focus on the negative side of relationships, so breakups and problems and obviously abuse, which is important to educate and inform and have out there. But I don't think we celebrate enough good relationships. I think there's lots of people we know in our own lives who have amazing relationships, or people who have really long marriages and go through the ups and downs. And I don't think generally as society or in the media or anything, we celebrate that kind of thing enough. What it takes to actually help relationships grow and flourish. I don't think that's enough. I think there's too much focus on the negative. I think there's a lot of criticism about programs like Married at First Sight or Love Island. People have opinions about those. They're just trashy TV. And, I sort of look at it a slightly different way, because I think in some of those programs, you can really look at examples of red flags. You can learn quite a lot about relationship behaviors, which can be quite valuable for us to learn and take forward. So, you can see toxic behavior playing out in front of you. You can see how people react. And you're like, well, actually, she should be saying that behavior is not acceptable to me. And we learn from those things. And I think actually they have quite an important role in that. And I think it's wrong to just totally trivialize those kind of programs, because I think they can be quite useful. If you have children growing up, actually watching one of those kind of programs, you're just watching TV. It's quite a good in to kind of talk to your teenager about sex, relationships. What would you do in that? What do you think about what she's doing or he's doing? That kind of conversation, which might be really hard for you to start just with your kid in a room, but it gives you a kind of in to really explore some of those things, and that can be really useful, I think. So I don't think we should just diss those programs, in my opinion.
Oh, because
really
that is really
refreshing.
refreshing, because he's right. It's an intense psychological, sociological experiment, isn't it? That's what they all started, and also, as you said, with the children, like I would be like, oh, I don't want them to watch that because I don't want them to think, but actually. Well, I don't know. You've got to like watching it at some point, but also when there is gaslighting and like the extreme reactions, sometimes you can have the conversation of like why they reacted like that and why it's
Totally.
important.
Yeah, because it's never put on a pedestal. Like if someone acts in a bad way, it's not put on a pedestal as a good thing. Actually, it's pretty obvious that it's not a good thing.
Yeah, and
So
then
people
reaction
do
around
learn
it
from that.
is like society's like, no, that's not okay.
Yeah,
It's totally, because you see that played out, and because it's not your relationship and it's not anyone we can be a bit more objective, which I think is really useful. And I think definitely there are learnings, because you see healthy relationship behavior, which you can talk about and highlight, and you see the negative, and you can talk about it, because we want our children and to grow up knowing how to have healthy relationships, knowing what they are. And I think there is an example where you can talk about that and say, what might you do differently, or do your children actually see that as unhealthy behavior? I mean, that's the other thing that's really interesting as a parent. And obviously I'm not talking about young children here, we're talking about older children, but it's quite interesting if there is this toxic example played out in front of them and they don't recognize that as toxic. That's where you need to then go in and educate, and that can be really helpful. They're not seeing that as poor behavior in a relationship, and that would be a worry for me as a parent, because they're not recognizing toxic behavior, and I can then help them to do that. And I think that is really important.
Wow.
Fantastic. That's such a surprising thing that you've said today, but I completely agree with it. I think
Yeah, I'd never
it's
ever
yeah,
thought of it like that.
yeah. So that's wonderful. I'm just realizing we're getting close to our 1 hour mark here. We have a few closing questions that we would love to ask you. So this first one is one of Katya's favorites, so I'm going to let her ask
Okay,
it.
yeah. Do you have any book recommendations for our listeners, whether it's about the area you work in, fiction, non-fiction, anything, just you suggest everyone should read?
Yeah, I do actually, and it is related to my work. And I'm going to read this. It's Not You is the title of the book. It's Not You: How to Identify and Heal from Narcissistic People. And it's written by Dr. Ramani Devasula. And she's a psychologist and a narcissistic expert. And it's a
Ah,
really kind of insightful guide to protecting and healing from narcissistic behavior towards you. That could be in relationships, or it could be from other family members or in work. So it's not just talking about romantic relationships, but she is a really expert in this field. And it's a really insightful guide to kind of help spot the signs, kind of protect yourself, know how to heal. It's definitely a really good book if you're in that situation where you think you've had it in the past. I would really recommend it.
perfect. Thank
That's a
you.
brilliant
That's
one.
a really good recommendation. Absolutely. And how can our listeners find you, find out about what you do, and support your work?
Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to anyone at any point. I have a website which is www.vanessawhite.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, Vanessa White. I'm on Instagram, Vanessa White Coaching, and TikTok as well. And yeah, I'm always happy to have conversations with anyone at any time. And obviously, I see clients one to one. So, yes, I'd love to talk to anyone who's interested.
Yep. I've seen on your website you have a 20-minute free, like little kind of, how do you call it?
Little call.
Get to know me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a word for it. There's a phrase for it.
Consultation.
It's a
Like a
discovery call.
like
Discovery
discovery
call.
call. That was the one.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I think it's really important for somebody. It's a relationship that we have, so it's really important they kind of get a chance to speak to me. There's no charge for that. There's no obligation afterwards for them to book any sessions, but they can see what I'm like. They can talk to me, understand what I might be able to do for them, and obviously for me, I can understand a little bit about what they're seeking help with. But I think it's really valuable because for a client coming, they're going to be really vulnerable, they're going to be opening up, and actually they need to know kind of a little bit about me. So I think it's really important.
Yeah. Wonderful. It's really great that you provide that.
So you, just to confirm, you go from people who are currently in a relationship and maybe in a toxic relationship and trying to understand their ways out, or just to talk to someone whether they are in a toxic relationship, somebody who may be at the start of the new beginnings and in a relationship and dating, and also just general relationships, just even if it's not a
Yeah,
toxic one, you need someone to chat with, just to...
yeah. I mean, I have a specialism in domestic abuse, but I don't exclusively
Okay.
work in that area. So I see all people, not just people who are in toxic relationships. And you're absolutely right, Katja. I see people, I have clients who come to me before they've even broken up. They might just want to explore with somebody professional what's going on for them. Maybe they're thinking they've fallen out of love. This kind of thing has happened where, there's a the void between them and their partner. Maybe something like adultery or addiction or something has landed in their relationship out of the blue, and they want to explore that going forward with somebody. And then I have people at all stages of heartbreak, separation, going through divorce. I do a lot of work about, parenting, co-parenting with your ex-partner, holding their hand through the process, dealing with the negative emotions, and then going out the other side where people want to get into relationship again and they want to understand how to have a healthy relationship, what do they need to do, how to increase their self-belief and self-worth so they're in a really good place. And yeah, how to start that dating process and really
Yes.
find a life that they really want with somebody, hopefully.
That's
Aw,
wonderful. Yeah.
nice.
So good. You do such a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much. I love what I
Yeah.
do.
Well, we just have one final question, and it's kind of blue skies. You can say absolutely anything. To you, very personally, what does health and happiness look like?
It's a really great question, actually. And it, for me, it's about feeling safe within myself and really understanding myself well, I suppose, and kind of using my past experiences to kind of go out as the best version of myself. Having people to love, I think that's really important. Being healthy so that I can live the life that I want. And I think for me, a big thing is freedom. Being free in all senses of the word is actually a really important thing for me.
Yes. Yeah, freedom. You're the second person who's mentioned
But
freedom.
it's something we take for granted.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it always surprises me when someone says it, but it's so true. Freedom is a huge thing.
Yeah. For
Nice.
me, I mean, for me, it is because I've had many years where I have not felt free on many levels, internally, externally. And so that feeling of freedom, yeah, is definitely a huge thing and is part of my health and happiness. And I think it should be for everyone because we should be able to live authentically as the person we really want to be and feel free to do that, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, wise words.
And
Thank
that's
you.
a great, don't think we say anything else after
Yeah,
that.
that's a brilliant way to finish.
Exclamation mark.
So, Vanessa, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
I've absolutely loved chatting to both of you. You're amazing hosts, and I'm really grateful for you inviting me on. And I've really, really loved it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.
And you, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you for staying to the end.
Yes. Wow.
And
that episode. Wow.
Yeah.
Surprising end.
Yeah, I could not have guessed where that conversation was going to go.
Yeah,
Just-
I love it.
It wasn't, it might have felt quite full on at the beginning, but actually, it was a very interesting episode that I think everybody could take something from, whether you're whatever
Definitely.
relationship you are.
Even if you're not, thankfully, in a toxic relationship, having listened to that also can just make you feel super grateful that your partner is not like this example. But then for those of you who do have this unfortunate situation, a lot to learn from.
Yeah, and I think it's somewhere, it's good to know where to start if someone, or if, your friend confides in you, or if you're in that situation, then reaching out to Vanessa, our DMs are always open, but we're not professionals, but someone reaching out to Vanessa can help you kind of understand, put the pieces of the jigsaw together of what you possibly could do, and, find, as she said, take your power back and start to create your future that you deserve. So I think there's quite a powerful message in there, and I think having for someone like Vanessa to coach you through it and help you, it's just, it just takes a bit of the fear away that you're not alone. I
think so, because when you're so close to it, you lose perspective.
Yes.
I'm sure the people in the situation, they lose the self-trust, the self-esteem. They start thinking it might be all their fault.
Yeah.
She described getting smaller and smaller, which was just such a heartbreaking thing to hear.
But so we hope you found it as useful. We'll kind of go into it a bit more on our weekly waffle.
Yes.
But yes, thank you for listening, staying to the end. And if you do know anyone in the situation, please send them to Vanessa, or
also send this episode to them. Click the little share and copy the link and text it to your friend. Yeah. It might be just what someone needs to hear.
Okay. Well, leave it on that note. We'll say goodbye, and we shall see you for more chat on Thursday.
Yeah, see you at the weekly waffle. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us on hello@healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
Or we'd love to connect with you on our Instagram, Facebook or TikTok pages.
You'll find the links to all our socials and more on our website, www.healthandhappinesspodcast.com.
And lastly, before you go, please give our podcast a rating and a review. It really helps others find us.
See you next week.
Bye.